Hello, welcome to the Kansas Board of Regents meeting for March of 2024. Call this meeting to order, and our first item for business is the approval of minutes from our lovely Valentine's Day we spent together last month, February 14th and 15th. Do we have any changes or corrections? If not, I'd love a motion to approve. Not all at once, please.
So I'll second.
All right, moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, we approved the minutes. Now on to introductions. Do we have any introductions? In the room? Yes, President Flanders.
Thank you, Chair Rolfe. I would like to welcome and introduce Rusty Monholland as the board's new Vice President for Academic Affairs. And we are all so glad to have Rusty come back to Kansas and be in our state. Prior to joining the board, he served as President and Executive Director of the South Carolina Commission of Higher Education. And before that was the Assistant Commissioner for Academic Affairs at the Missouri Department of Higher Ed. He led initiatives on reverse transfer, system-wide transfer curriculum, incorporating best practices in developmental and remedial education and math pathways. So very similar to what we're doing here. Rusty earned his bachelor's degree from Washburn and his master's and doctoral degrees in history from the University of Kansas. And he and his wife Sonia are both native Kansans, have 4 children. And welcome, Rusty.
Thank you. Yes, President Linton.
Good afternoon. I would like to introduce our new student body president, Paige Volgamore. Paige, why don't you come on up here and introduce yourself to the group?
Hello, my name is Paige Volgamore. I'm a junior this year at K-State and I'm studying agricultural economics and I'm from Scott City, Kansas.
That's great. Madam President-elect.
So I should note that you might remember that last name. Parker Volgamore was president just 2 years ago, and I think it's the first time in our history that we've had siblings that have been president of the student body.
Cool. Great. Any other introductions? Okay, on to the chair's report. Look forward to being in Hayes next month. Should be great. Also want to welcome Rusty. We're grateful to have you on board and the important work we're doing. And I just want to take one moment to recognize Regent Cindy Lane and the great work she's been doing on the literacy bill. Spent a lot of time up here in our state's capital, burning shoe leather, giving testimony, and going above and beyond her normal regent duties. So thank you, Dr. Lane, for everything you're doing on that.
Thank you. It's my honor.
Yep.
Thought about a stand, you know.
Yeah. Now we'll move to the President CEO's report. Dr. Flanders.
Thank you, Chair Rolfe. I wanted to just take a moment to say thank you to some folks. I want to thank Dr. Carla Wiscombe for serving as our interim Vice President of Academic Affairs and really continuing to shepherd all of these initiatives as we conducted our search. I'd also like to thank the academic officers and the teams at the universities because we're doing a collective heavy lift. And I'd also like to thank all the members of Carla Wiscombe's team in academic affairs. When you're shorthanded, we still didn't put anything on ice or stop doing what our initiatives were the board was doing. And so I just appreciate all that work. That concludes my report.
Wonderful. Any questions for President Flanders? All right, hearing none. We'll go to the report from Council of Faculty Senate Presidents. I saw Dr. Von Bergen earlier. Here he comes. Welcome.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. Just a brief report this morning. I think you are all aware of the work the Faculty Senate presidents have been doing regarding putting in place criteria for the Faculty of the Year Award. This is a recognition by the board, and it will recognize a tenure track and a tenured faculty member from each institution on an annual basis. Currently, where we're at on that is President Flanders has seen the common criteria that the presidents agreed upon. Those are working their way through the respective faculty senates. So far, so good, but as you can imagine, there's a number of hurdles that we have to jump through at that level as well. Some have already seen it at full Senate. I think we have one institution there, Senate has given thumbs up on it as well. So we're hopeful that things will continue to progress on that opportunity to recognize some of our teaching colleagues. Also, I have put a request in. We're hoping that eventually travel costs associated with recipients traveling to receive the award can be made available as well. So that is it on the criteria for the Faculty of the Year Award. Just one other quick note. We, the Faculty Senate presidents, feel we've had a good year engaging the board this year, working with each other, and we want to keep that momentum going. So we are making plans for a transitional meeting when we meet here with all of you in mid-May, and we are hoping to bring on board, motivate, welcome our new Faculty Senate presidents so that they can hit the ground running in June. And that is my report. I'll stand for questions.
Any questions?
Thank you.
All right.
And we appreciate the attention to transition. That's very important when we have as much turnover as we have.
You're right. Thank you, Regents. I appreciate that.
Yep.
All right.
Thank you. All right, next up, Caleb Stout. Report of Student Advisory Committee, President Stout.
Good afternoon, Regents, Chancellors, President. It is great to be with everyone again today. So we are hitting the ground running back in Topeka. As you know, students just got back from spring break, and we were able to catch up for the first time since, as Chair Rolfe said, our Valentine's together a month ago. So as President Linton said, my ticket to retirement is here. And so that is that's what's been consuming most of each student government recently, is just elections and preparing for transitions and kind of passing on the baton. And so it's one of the fun parts about being student leadership is it's fast, but it also goes really quick. Other things going on is we're starting our student fee discussions at each university, and we're excited to be working together with other students, figuring out kind of what that looks like at our respective campuses. And we also spoke today about this idea of food for fines. And I don't know, board, if you guys this has slid across your desk or not, but it's a notion that's popular across our different universities, and it's instituted at Wichita State, but not at any other universities. It's the idea of being able to alleviate your parking tickets or traffic violations that you get from like the university police, being able to pay for those with donations to campus food pantry. There's a lot of different iterations of what that could look like. But that was brought to our attention. That was something that we talked about and kind of unpacked a little bit today. And we're learning about how it goes at some of our universities. But anyway, that's everything from the student front. So I will stand for any questions you might have.
Any questions for President Stout? Thank you very much.
Thank you,
Great
guys.
work. Yeah. All right, we'll go to standing committee reports, academic affairs, and the legendary Regent Lane.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Before I give my report, I also want to extend my appreciation to lots of folks who've been involved with the blueprint of literacy that became a Senate passed out with unanimous support from the senators and is now in the House. So thank you to Dr. Flanders and Kelly Oliver and the team here. You've spent an enormous amount of time on this singular topic. I've appreciated that. And to you, President Shipp, your team has been very helpful. So it's really good work and positive outcome, I'm sure, to happen. If nothing else, the state knows how invested the Regents institutions are and our deans of education in that important work. So thank you all. Academic Affairs has been very busy. On March 5th, we had our virtual meeting and had a report on Apply Free Days and Apply Kansas update. We talked about the recommendations from the Performance Agreement Work Group. We discussed performance funding guidelines, and we also talked about the Sport Metrics quarterly reporting, which will begin in September. During our meeting today, we reviewed the proposed changes in the performance report. Those recommendations are before you today, board, for your consideration. There's a minor adjustment there in those, and we talked about the performance agreement guidelines and procedures. In addition, we had updates on math pathways and math course placement. We talked about where we are with the general education exceptions and extensions. We received a report on the system-wide elementary education transfer associates program, received a brief update on our program-to-program articulation and nursing, and we celebrated the good news on campuses. So full meeting, lots of wonderful things happening on our campuses, and it's always a pleasure to hear about those. That concludes my report, Mr. Chair.
Any questions for President or Dr. Lane? Okay, hearing none. We'll move over to Fiscal Affairs and Audit with Regent Benson.
All right, thank you, Mr. Chair. Committee met this morning. Each year we hear from each state university on their financial outlook compared to plan. Today, Emporia State presented on their financials. As a regional university, as state funding has not kept up with inflation for overall operation, we heard that ESU cannot make up for that erosion in revenue by tuition rate increases alone. The SGF for the student success playbooks alone, just by themselves, would be a 4 to 5% rate increase. ESU has the lowest tuition and fees among their peers and is next to bottom among the MIAA schools, second only to Fort Hays State University. So ESU's efforts to closely examine their processes and policies and change where necessary in support of increasing student enrollment should prove impactful to ESU's bottom line. Kansas State presented as well. They have efforts underway to launch a new campus master plan process later this month, implement 2 new uniform KSU-wide IT systems that will eliminate legacy systems. Key challenges they are facing at Kansas State are enrollment, cybersecurity, and faculty and staff recruitment and retention. Fort Hays State also presented and noted the key challenges there were enrollment and inflation. Also heard from Jim McMurray with the Kansas Development Finance Authority, who presented to the committee on the state university's rates of indebtedness and the current status of the bond market. He presented the university's combined indebtedness from 2005 to 2022, while the debt grew at a steep rate up to 2015. Since 2016, it has decreased by over 11%. He reviewed the Moody's rating scorecard for each state university, and KDFA has favored Moody's over the S&P due to S&P's less favorable rating methodology and less favorable commercial terms. He recommended KBOR include debt burden ratio, average debt, service coverage, and viability ratio in the issue paper when a debt authorization is requested of the board in the future. KBOR staff agreed that that could easily be incorporated and will be done in the future, Mr. Chairman. We also discussed the board agenda items on our agenda call, so we didn't spend any additional time on them today. And as always, appreciate Elaine writing up the summary because it was a busy meeting, but feel like we got a lot done this morning.
Questions for Regent Benson? Great job.
Thank you.
All right, I'll do governance. Governance Committee met this morning and reviewed changes to the academic year 2025 board calendar to avoid conflicts with spring break and the Juneteenth holiday. The February 2025 meeting will take place on February 12th and 13th, so an early Valentine's Day. The March 2025 meeting will take place on March 12th and 13th, and the June 2025 meeting will take place on June 11th and 12th. So you guys want to make sure you change that in your calendars. Committee also heard a first read on a draft policy amendment that would prohibit universities from requiring statements pledging allegiance to, support for, or opposition to any political ideology or movement, including a pledge or statement regarding diversity, equity, or inclusion on its applications for admission or hiring, reappointing, or promoting a faculty member. Finally, the committee received a campus safety and security report from Pittsburgh State University from not only the chief, but mayor of the community, 2-in-1 right there. It was great. Any questions for me out of governance? Okay. Next up, we have retirement plan from Region Ice.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. The Retirement Plan Committee met yesterday for our semi-annual review of the board's retirement plans. As of the end of last year, we have over $6 billion in assets, so important work, of course, by the committee. We always receive a report from our consultant ACG, which among other things reviews investment performance. We have 2 funds that have been on the watch list. We had seen some positive impacts, so we're holding them on the watch list, and we'll review that in the fall meeting. And then we also are going to recommend a new fund offering, an international bond fund. That will require board approval, but that would come at the April meeting. So consider this the first communication about that. We got then updates from both of our plan providers, TIAA and Voya. And we convened a subcommittee that's going to review some of the topics that have come up that we think are important to the retirement committee. So wait to hear those exciting outcomes later. And then we convened a subcommittee. Our legal contract is expiring, so in order to be in full accord with appropriate bidding processes and so forth, RFPs, we've formed a subcommittee to review that legal contract and to make sure we have a replacement provider. I'll stand for questions, Mr. Chair.
Questions for Region Ice? Also some above and beyond work for your region assignment. Thank you for all the work you've done on that. Okay, let's move on to consent agenda. Any questions or comments, or do I have a motion to approve? Move to approve and a second. Any other conversation? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, consent agenda passes. Move on to discussion agenda. And first up,
Fire.
yeah, man, we're hustling today. We'll call up President Hush to act on the naming request for Emporia State University. President Hush.
Thank you, Chair, Regents. You have the request in front of you. Of the 7 or 8 asks, the majority of them are focused around our new nursing and wellness center that is being built. As a reminder, by the way, that breaks ground next month and finish for fall 25 start. The first handful are the naming request related to various labs and rooms associated with that, and the other couple are continued improvements that we're making throughout our campus. Any questions to the request?
Any questions for President Hush? Doing great work raising money down there on these projects, and I'm appreciative of your success.
Thank you very much. The team has done a phenomenal job. We did announce over the last few weeks during the various presentations that we have made to legislators. As you might recall, we requested and you approved, and then it was approved by legislators last year, $15 million bonding. We announced a couple weeks ago that we do not need that at all whatsoever. That we have raised the funds. We leveraged what the legislators all gave last year and exemplified that story to Hornet Nation, and things came out of the woodwork. So we're pleased with that from the future needs for our students. So thank you.
Great, yeah.
Congratulations.
We need to take action. So any other questions for President Hush, or do I hear a motion to approve the naming request?
I would move for approval.
Move to approve. Do I have a second? Second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Thank you, President Hush.
Thank you very much.
Great work. All right, next up, we have President Linton to act on naming requests with Kansas State University.
We've got two requests this afternoon. The first one is for the formal designation of naming a program, the SGA Gordon Family Scholars. The SGA Gordon Family Scholars, if approved, will serve as a program for top undergraduate students to receive scholarships, mentoring from faculty, and expanded opportunities to participate in research and international activities. Just to give you a sense, Jim and Debbie Gordon have established a really strong history of philanthropy at Kansas State University and within the Manhattan community. They've been generous to many units on campus, including the College of Business Administration, where we're seeking approval for the naming of this scholars program. Sink Gordon and Associates is a prominent accounting firm that's been in the Manhattan area for over 75 years. So your formal approval to the SGA Gordon Family Scholars Program in recognition of their support to K-State would be greatly appreciated.
Any questions for President Linton?
And they do my taxes really good.
There we go. All right, hearing none, do I hear a motion to approve? All right, so moved. Do I hear a second?
Second.
All right, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed? Okay, thank you. And on to your next one.
The next request is to be able to support the nomination of Mr. Tim Taylor for an honorary doctorate from Kansas State University. Just a little bit of background on Tim Taylor. He earned a bachelor's degree in chemical engineering from K-State. In 1975, he then completed coursework at the University of Texas at Tyler prior to passing the CPA exam in 1982, receiving awards and having test scores among the 10 highest in the state of Texas and the top 100 in the entire United States. In addition, he was nominated and completed Northwestern's University Advanced Management Program. He's had a very storied career with lots of leadership positions and roles. Most notably, from 2012 to 2017, he was the president and executive vice president for Phillips 66. Prior to that leadership role, he was the chief operating officer for EVP olefins and polyolefins from 2000 to 2011. And prior to that, from 1996 to 2000, he was at Phillips Petroleum as an operations management in charge of polyolefins, polyethylene, and plastic operations. I'll take just a couple of words from one of his letters of nomination and reference. This comes from the president and CEO current at Phillips 66. Tim is a leader. Tim is technically astute. Tim is a networker. And Tim is a very strong businessman. And most importantly, Tim is a proud Wildcat. So with that, we would seek your support of the nomination that would recognize Tim Taylor with an honorary doctorate, which would be awarded at the commencement services this upcoming May.
I'll make the motion, Mr. Chair.
All right, it's been moved. Do I have a second? Second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign.
Thank you.
2 for 2.
For two.
Good work. You've been winning, I was complimenting President Linton. I've had several students that have been looking out of state and in-state to other universities, and they've been bringing them all into K-State there with their recruitment and on-campus experiences they've been given. So great work there at K-State. Love. It's good for us to be winning in the state. Yes, sir. Yes, Regent Lane.
Thank you, Regent Chair Rolfe. Could we put on an upcoming agenda, perhaps the governance, you decide where to review our naming policy? Just want to get clear in my mind, the timeline, the flow, and how all that works.
Absolutely. We'll add that to governance next month. Does that sound good? John, does that give you enough time? Counselor? All right. All right. Let me pick up where we were. We're now on to fiscal affairs and audit. The one and only Elaine Frisbee is gonna come up. We're gonna act on a request to amend housing rates for the 24-25 academic year for the University of Kansas Jayhawks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm referring to pages 27 and the top of page 28. The University of Kansas in Lawrence has occasion to have more demand for on-campus housing than they can provide. So for the second year, they are seeking your approval to lease off-campus space in several apartment buildings, which are, I believe, are now owned by KU Endowment. So there are some new rates on the top of page 28 that would be in addition to what you acted on at the December meeting. So by board policy, we have first read in November. The board acts in December to set the housing and food service rates for the coming year. So this is an expansion of those rates to serve the additional student demand. We also have a feature where they are seeking to reconfigure some spaces at the Stauffer Place Apartments to add some bed space, to reconfigure space that normally would be for 4 to 6 students. And then they've accommodated the rate there on page 28. Be happy to answer questions.
Questions for Elaine?
Chair Ralph,
Yes.
when we changed the size of the space from 4 to 6, did we reduce the tuition or is it increased per student?
The rate is adjusted for that. So it's lower.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you.
Other questions? Demand is a good problem to have. Great problem to have. Good work. All right, do I hear? Moved. All right, thank you, Regent Dykes. Do I have a second? Second. Do I have any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. All right, motion passes. We'll keep on rolling here for the enrollment report for the system.
All right. While Steve is pulling that up for me, I would just note that the PowerPoint is located on our website under our system data tab for enrollment reports. And Regents, you have this emailed before you if you'd rather follow along on your device. Moving on, so all of the information here, this is a retrospective of the enrollment data from academic year 2023. So now we're in 2024. So this is a retrospective, a postmortem, if you will, looking back in time. All of this is made possible by all the DRP folks in our agency, headed up by Cindy Ferrier, as well as the IR staff at the universities, the community colleges, the technical colleges, and Washburn University. So we've been able to leverage that information. I know you're all familiar with our Degree Stats website, the military portal that we offer to members of the military, our data books that we publish annually, and our online reporting tool, Key Stats. So we express our thanks to those folks who make this possible. We have, so just also to clarify, this is an academic year report talking about courses delivered for academic credit. Our institutions, all of them offer other types of courses, enrichment courses, and business and industry training. This is not what this is. The institutions do those things for their communities. I know KU has the Osher Institute. K-State has the UFM Institute. So this is not what that is. For Key Stats, we have added 2 features to the website this year. Our data team did that. We have added distance delivery as a delivery method and Pell recipient information to the enrollment tab. So we've got some new features there for users to go get additional information. So for the system as a whole, enrollment looking back for the entirety of the last academic year. Academic year 2023, on a 10-year look back, our FTE students have, as this is the collective whole for all of our public institutions, we are now down 14.5%. On a headcount basis, we are down 15.7%. We're going to delve into it sector by sector and in some cases institution by institution, but you can see the data there going. We dropped on headcount from 259,000 almost to just over 218,000 over that 10-year period. There's been a lot of talk with the DEI legislation, and I know a legislator requested information on whether our institutions are becoming more diverse. So we've included some detail for each of for the system and for each of the sectors for different race and ethnic groups. We just grouped them by size. They're ordered by size for the entirety of the sector. Still serving mostly primarily white students. We're down there 24% over the time period 2013 to 2023. We have Hispanic students where we are up nearly 36%. Our Black and African American students down about 30%. All other students, that would include our international students. We lump them all together in one group. So everybody else who isn't in one of those other categories shows up there, down almost 32%. We have our American Indian Alaska Native students down 30%. Asian students were up 5.1%. For those students we don't know, they either haven't identified themselves, we're up 38%. And also interestingly, those students who'd identify as having 2 or more races were up 51.5%. So again, this is for everybody across the system and all the sectors together. Same numbers, but just for our state universities. Somewhat similar trends, down on white students, up quite a bit on Hispanic students, and down in other areas. And again, students with 2 or more races up 42%. Washburn University, they are their own sector, so we have a page for them as well, very similar information. Washburn, and we're going to talk about that later, has also been suffering some enrollment decline, so you can see that reflected here across the different groups. Community colleges as a whole have also suffered large enrollment decline. So white students here were down 38.2%, but Hispanic students up over almost 16%. And again, students of 2 or more races up 37%. And our technical colleges, over this 10-year period, they are seeing overall increases. We had a dip during the pandemic, but they are recovering from that. And you can see in their groupings, I see an error there under the white students, so something got misplaced there. So we'll have to correct that for the record. But our Hispanic students are up, white students are up as well, of course. We're seeing some increases also in the numbers served in all other. It's very small for them. But again, the students of 2 or more races quite remarkably increasing. So we'll correct that page, technical colleges. African American also up. All right, some of these lighter blue lines are hard to see against the white, but here we are grouping everybody again across all 4 sectors by age. We are tilting more heavily to those students under age 20. We have a lot more high school students doing concurrent enrollment, and we're going to talk about that as well. But we are losing ground with our older students, especially those more seasoned folks over the age of 35. We're down 32%. Remarkably, your typical working group age person in age 25 to 34, we're down 34%. Looking at gender, we're losing ground in most areas except remarkably at the technical colleges. You can see the increases there, particularly for men, but ladies also at the technical colleges growing 32%. Elsewhere, we're seeing declines more so on the male side than the female side. Looking at headcount by residency over the 10-year time frame. As a system, we are losing ground on terms of serving numbers of resident students. We're down 22.7% over the time frame, but we are up 20% on non-residents. So we are drawing in 10,000 more people now, almost 11,000 than we are a year ago, 10 years ago. And you can see how that varies across the different sectors. In this case, we combined Washburn in with the other state universities, and then we've got the community colleges, their decline in resident students, an increase in non-resident. And it's a little different for the technical colleges. For a technical college by state law, you can be considered a resident from day 1. So I honestly don't know why there are 49 folks identified as non-resident. So again, here's our trend, looking for who are full-time and who are part-time students. We do serve a lot more part-time students than we do full-time. And you can see the declines, and in both cases, generally, I believe the proportion has held fairly steady. About 65-35%. Roughly about 36% of our students are full-time.
Elaine, is that 15 hours a semester that makes full-time? Is that our?
12.
12, okay.
12. In this case, it's 12. By student type then. Our students, you can see that the blue line at the top, this is our all other undergraduate students. So your sophomores, juniors, and seniors declining about 17.4%. The three lines that are very close in scale at the bottom, the one place we have grown over the 10-year period are graduate students, and that is the orange line in the middle there. We have grown 11.8% there. But for our incoming first-time entering students, the yellow line, we are down 30.9%. Our new transfer students in the dark blue were down over 8%. So those are the distinctions, how we group our students by type over the 10-year period. We also track, of course, we have our new information in the key stats on Pell eligibility, and the number of students we've served who are Pell eligible has declined, just like we have declined overall, but at a steeper pace. So it does seem that cost of attendance and even with our improved financial aid, we still have some shortcomings in serving our Pell eligible students. We have declined since 2018, almost 28%, against a 10.7% overall decline in enrollment. And I would also just note for the university, those numbers reflect only undergraduate students. So Pell is not applicable for graduate students. And then lastly, we do have a page here on distance education. We've talked about this in our Fiscal Affairs Committee meeting. The bars at the left reflect 3.5 million in student credit hours that were delivered in academic year 2023, which is actually down 7.3% from what we did in 2022, but that is up 6.5% from 5 years ago. So still a lot of our students taking credit hours. Overall, as a system, that red-orange bar is 32% of our total credit hours were delivered online for the system. And you can see for each sector then, the variances for the technical colleges, as you would expect, just under 17% of their courses were delivered online. Community colleges, just over 41%, and the universities, 29%. The pie chart on the right then just reflects of the $3.5 million, 3.5 million credit hours, what percentage was delivered at each of the sectors. So state universities delivered over half of those credit hours, and that was 598,000 credit hours delivered online.
What would that have looked like 2019? Do you know?
I'd have to go back and look.
Well, just on 5-year, how much that changed through the pandemic and over the last 5 years.
Mhm.
Can I go back just one slide too? National trend on Pell eligible students going to college, does it reflect this, do you know, or?
We can certainly investigate that. I suspect it might be unique to each state situation. Other states have much more generous financial aid packages that they can put together with the Pell. So we'd have to look at that.
I'm looking at that.
We will.
Thank you very much.
So those slides reflect the entirety of our 4 sectors. So looking then individually to each sector, our state universities, a similar line graph for headcount and FTE, just looking at the 6 state universities with the Med Center and K-State Vet Med in there, have seen declines over the 10 years. We are clearly seeing some rebounding, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. So think back to when this was academic year 2023. So starting in fall 2022 through spring and summer of 2023. So keep that in mind for that timeline. So characteristics of our first time entering students at our 6 universities. So we've got two charts here, the three research universities all up in fall census. So this is looking at just the fall census, not the entirety of the academic year. So it's that first note of when you might see recovering enrollments. So this gets you to fall of 2023, so a more recent data point than in the other slides. And you can see for the 3 research universities, fall 2023, each of the 3 at the top, KU, K-State, and Wichita State are all up. And remarkably, KU, I think, has well exceeded any other data point across the series. And then our 3 regional universities, Emporia, Fort Hays, and Pittsburgh State. For Fort Hays and Pittsburgh, you can see where they are also seeing some recovery there in fall of 2023. And so we do have Emporia State is the one that has not yet recovered. So this is first time entering. Those first students coming in, they don't have, they're not transferring. For transfer students, we also track that, of course. We see some recovery as well. For all 3 of our research universities, they are also seeing some increases. So we'd hope that the efforts to improve program articulation, the additional work on course articulation will help promote this and help more students make that transfer. Don't know if the Promise Act scholarship, helping students get through a 2-year program and promoting the idea of getting additional information and additional education might also help with transferring. Well, we'll see. Also on our regional institutions, we do see Fort Hays seeing some recovery there, and you will see some fluctuation there among the 3 regional universities, and that is mostly attributable to Fort Hays. I believe that the quota that was set by the Chinese government affected the dual degree enrollment program, and so I think the quota where they reduced the allocation affected that yellow bar in the middle of the bar graphs on the bottom. International students coming to our state universities. We've had 2 recent years of rather low numbers. Now, you'll notice the vast difference, again, 2022 and 2023 on the yellow. That is Fort Hays State and how they have changed their reporting for the students on their China campuses. So that's very much attributable to that. But for the other universities, we are down 9.1% from 2013, down from our peak year as well, but we are up from 2022, last year, 7.2%. So we could be seeing some recovery here for our universities. Another slide we've provided you for the last few years in the enrollment report is looking at for those students who would be taking at least 12 hours. So they are considered for financial aid purposes full-time. Are they full-time? Are they taking 15 credit hours? So if you think to your policy where a 4-year degree is 120 hours, which would equate to 30 hours a year, 15 hours a semester gets you to a 4-year degree. So looking at students at our state universities taking at least 15 hours to get to 4-year degree, you can see for each of the universities over time, we've seen some improvement there. Would certainly note where you are able to pay a flat rate seems to also influence this because Emporia and Fort Hays, you do see higher numbers there and you pay a flat rate to be full-time at those schools. So that might be influencing those figures. As it is, as entirety of our system, we are now at 53% of our full-time undergraduate students. So 53% of those at least taking 24 hours. So it's not 53% of all the students. 53% of those who are taking at least 24 hours in a year. They are taking at least 30 hours in a year. So they would be considered on time to get a 4-year degree. So if you only take 12 hours a semester and get 24 in a year, you're not quite there.
Elaine, just out of curiosity, why do we differentiate before we call a full-time student 12 hours, but to graduate on time, it's 15? Why
So
aren't
for-
we consistent?
For federal financial aid purposes, you are considered full-time at 12. So in the strategic plan metrics, we have this as one of the dashboard items, as well as this one. Students with sufficient academic load, are they passing their courses? So the two lines, the bars there on the right where for 2023, so 53.1% of our university students are taking at least 30 hours a year. Of those 53.1%, 73% are passing their classes, passing all 30. So they're not dropping out, they're not withdrawing, they're not failing. They are passing all of those 30 hours. And this is this is a new metric that we have in the new dashboard for the strategic plan.
Yeah. So then just to, if we had pretending that just for the board that we had in 2023, let's say we had 100 students. What we would be saying essentially is about 35, 38 of those would be passing.
That's my understanding of the metric. I would defer to those who've been more involved in the
Yeah.
dashboard. Yeah,
Or 73% of the 50%.
of the half, yes. So hence the work with EAB and everything else. All right, so that's the state universities. A few slides on Washburn University. They have been hit with some more sizable enrollment adjustments. I know they're doing some work with their own version of a Promise Scholarship for Shawnee County. President Mazachek is doing some work there. On a headcount basis, they have declined 25% over the 10-year period. On an FTE basis, over 26%. Community colleges, they have suffered the largest declines in enrollment. Headcount basis, 29%, FTE over 27%. And the technical colleges have enjoyed some increases. Of course, you can see the recovery there from the pandemic. Over the 10-year period, they are up over 53%, and they are on an FTE basis up over 18%. Like to show this, I showed this with the TEA a few months ago. The extent to which the students at the community colleges are taking tiered courses. Tiered are the technical courses. So a course is a binary. You're either in a tiered course or a non-tiered course. So you can think of a non-tiered course as being a general education type course. So you can see the majority of the lines are in blue. That would tell you that most of the students at the community colleges are taking non-technical courses, at least in 2023.
Quick question, Elaine, does this include our CTE students? High school students taking tiered or
Yes.
non-tiered? Thank you.
We had 19 community colleges, so merely showed the proportions. For the 7 technical colleges, I can show a little bit more detail, the actual scale of what they're offering in terms of tiered and non-tiered on a credit hour basis. So the numbers there for each of the schools on the left, of course, WSU Tech, much larger than many of the other schools, how the size of what they're delivering in tiered and non-tiered courses, and then their proportions. You can see the much larger yellow proportions there for them. So which Washburn Tech, for example, is not offering very much non-tiered courses, at least last year. As we mentioned before, on the skewing toward younger students, the percentage of credit hours at our technical colleges and our community colleges delivered for high school students for any high school student going to our two-year schools. So you can see from 2013, the dark blue chart bar, and then moving up into the light purple in 2023, how much we have grown in that area. So,
Which one's which?
oh, the label fell off, didn't it? To the left are the community colleges. To the right are technical colleges. That's odd. It was labeled at one time. So delivering much more than we used to for high school students. And on that, to that end, you can see the actual, I think this is head count. So those high school students who are enrolled at our community and technical colleges. So you can be in a different course. So CEP, you can see the table there at the bottom. CEP is concurrent enrollment program where you are taking a course at a high school, but you're taking it for college credit. And we haven't, you can see the growth there over time. A CEP course could be an Excel and CTE course. But it doesn't have to be. So we have two rows there designated with Excel and CTE. So Excel and CTE is our high school program where our agency covers the tuition expense for high school students. And then we have 6,400 students who were just dually enrolled. They took a course at college, might have driven over to their local community college and while they're a high school student and taken a course.
Yeah, President Flanders.
So may not know this. Do we have data on these dual enrollments? I would expect the dual enrollments, sometimes they'd be driving to the campus. On the CEP, do we have data on where the location is?
I
I'm thinking
believe
is
we
it
do.
yeah, mostly
believe
at
we
the
do.
high school, probably.
Yes.
So what, I guess what that might suggest is if your enrollment, if your dual and concurrent enrollment is increasing and the percentage of that enrollment is at the high school, then probably your need for facilities renewal is increased on the main campus because you might need, your footprint might be too large.
Potentially, depending on the nature of what's driving your programs on campus.
Elaine, is it possible to receive this data broken out by region so we can see where the opportunities are and where our equity gaps might be in the offerings?
I suspect we could do that. If anybody can, it'd be our DOT team. All right. So talking a little bit then, still focusing on our high school.
Region winner, sorry.
Oh, sorry.
What percentage of high school students taking college course actually enroll in a 2 or 4 year university?
I think that number is quite high, but I think we can find out.
And has it been has it been increasing over the last 4 to 5, 6 years?
I believe it has.
Okay.
I think Donna Ginther actually did a study for us. Now, it's been a few years. Our transfer students and our high school students who take Excel and CTE do very well when they go to the 4-year universities. So I think we've had success there. So we'll see what we can get you.
Great, thank you.
Talking about college readiness and our college going rate. Not so good news on the percentage of our students who are meeting the ACT benchmarks. So the data you see here, for example, English is declined from 72% of our students to 50%. So this is comparing 2013 to 2023. That decline reflects our high school graduates. So only those students who graduated and took the ACT, which is more prevalent now than it was. There was a policy change where the state decided to cover the expense for taking the ACT, so the student have to bear that expense. So I think the researchers were indicating we should see a decline in the outcomes, but we have now reached a stage where for meeting all 4 of the benchmarks on the ACT, we used to be at 30%. We are now for 2023 at 19%. And the benchmarks are there, noted there on the bottom left. The way that it is explained, and Blake says this better in his testimony than I do, but as I understand it, students who meet an ACT benchmark through research from ACT have at least a 50% chance of earning a B or higher grade, and approximately a 75 to 80% chance of earning a C or higher grade in the corresponding college course. So ACT would say if you're hitting the benchmark, you're a pretty safe bet that you're going to at least get a C when you take that course when you get to college.
Elaine, do we know how we compare nationally on this data?
I do. So thinking back at 2013, we were leading the nation by 4 points. We are now lagging behind the nation as a whole by 2 percentage points. For English, we are 1 point behind. For reading, we are the same. On math, we are 2 points behind, and science, 1 point behind.
Yeah, so this is why I think we all need to get behind the board and the deans of education with the blueprint for literacy. Because across these, you might know is that even in math, if you're having trouble reading, you're not going to do well in math. And you're certainly not going to do well in science and English. And so that reading piece really does affect all subject matters. And I think that it's really time when you see some of these numbers, you realize how critical it is that we do something now.
All right, so
With respect to the college readiness subject, do we have any idea about the extent to which students who don't meet all 4 just decide not to go on to college or universities? I would assume that the more students that feel like they're not ready, they're not going to go to college. Do we have any data on that?
I don't know if we have data on that. We're going to talk a little bit about why some students might hesitate to enroll in college at the very end. Somebody has done some research on that. So we are going to get into that some, not necessarily tied to ACT. And I do know our former VP for Academic Affairs would like to suggest that, ACT is one benchmark. We talked a lot about disposing of or dispensing with it during the pandemic. I think some were thinking a high school GPA was just as an effective benchmark, if not better. So we don't have data on high school's students' GPA.
Final question, do we have any data on whether there's an additional cost to our universities and colleges because of this
Yes,
line?
we're going to get to that in a moment.
Thank you.
Vice President Frisbee, I was curious, do we have actual numbers here? As I know that from 13 to 23, the state of Kansas started picking up, of course, ACT cost, and so more students take the ACT. Is that reflecting, would we assume that that's one of the reasons that we're lower?
That could very much be one of the reasons. So students who would have formerly had no interest in taking it did end up taking it. Don't know.
But there's really no
We can
data.
get the numbers for you though.
I was just curious about that.
Yeah, so we could get that. I would say that 19% is low.
Yeah.
And regardless of how many are taking it and these are the in terms of the developmental education and the cost for that. Here's what's happening in the system where that's not going to show quite like it once did. And am I stealing a slide? Okay, I won't talk about it. I'll wait. Elaine's going to explain that here very soon.
I'll attempt to.
We wait with bated breath.
All right, so
Forward promoted.
all right. This slide, of course, represents all of the high school graduates who took the ACT in 2023. We can divide those students into groups, and here we have a slide showing the results for each of the different parts of the test for different race and ethnic groups. There are some clear gaps. I'll just let the reader, you can see those. Our Asian and white students are performing better on each of the different segments of the test. And as we have other students who are not performing as well. Similarly, we have a very distinct pattern when we look at students according to family income. And those students who have the highest family income, and you can see the groupings there from over 150,000 a year down to under 24,000 a year, how well they perform on the ACT in the different sections of the test. And when the institutions enroll students who may have less college readiness, there are expenses to be incurred to provide then what we call developmental education, formerly called remedial education. Our universities are statutorily prohibited from using state funding to deliver developmental education. We do count, so they cannot use state funding, so they must use tuition or other resources. Our two-year colleges are allowed, that we do count courses when they deliver a dev ed course in math or reading or English. That does count as a non-technical course in the cost model. The percentage of Kansas students taking developmental education courses has been trending downward as our enrollment has reduced. We also have some challenges in counting the students because we are changing practices and policies. So when a student is placed in a course and it's clearly marked developmental education or has some other marking, it's easy to track. Where there's additional activity being done now at the schools across the sectors to deliver co-requisite remediation, where a student is in the course English 101, Math 101 with students who aren't needing developmental education, then it's a little bit more difficult to track. So I think that is something that collectively we're all working on, but it does create a little bit of a difficulty in tracking these things. But this is what we have for last year. We have in years past converted these figures into the actual costs that the institutions are incurring to deliver those courses. And it was a sizable cost that they incur to help students get to college level. A college going rate. So we have seen a distinct decline in our overall college going rate for our Kansas high school graduates. Last year, just over 43% of our Kansas high school graduates entered a Kansas public post-secondary institution within 1 year of high school graduation. And it was about 44% the year prior. So this is quite a bit down since 2014. I think 2014 was the peak year when we hit 55.3. So down 7.1 percentage points over the last 5 years and over 10.8 and 10.8 percentage points over the last decade. And then we've got some derived figures for students might also be going out of state. We think 10 to 11%, according to data, I think from National Student Clearinghouse, are leaving the state. And we also have figures where we've got students counted into going our in-state private schools. The overall, for our public schools though, just over 43%. And similarly to ACT scores, we can.
Oh, I just have one comment that I think those data are pretty powerful. But what you could infer from that, if you look at that, is that as you saw the slide on income and how those students are performing based on income. So if we used to have higher performance, maybe, okay, students from families that are less resourced are probably less likely to leave the state. So that number of 10.1% creeping up to 11% could be really a factor, not of more students leaving the state, but of just a little different mix of the entire college going rate. And you know, I don't hear about that number moving substantially. But the concern I think that we have, or the number that really we need to focus on, is that moving from 55% to 43% for our publics.
Regent Dicus?
But looking back, it seems like 2014 was the banner year in enrollment. What were we doing right then?
I'd have to think back 18 years prior to that to think about what birth rate might we have had back then. So we know that the looming enrollment cliff with the 18 years coming after the Great Recession in 08, 09, and people stopped having children right at that time. And so we've got a declining birth rate. The
Also-
cost of attendance has also been clearly a factor for some of our schools, some of our students.
State of Kansas is also noting that population is leaving Kansas as well. So they could be that they had a study done a couple of years back that said, you know, there is an aggressive rate of people leaving Kansas. So
President Flanders?
Yeah, so these percentages have dropped, not just the raw number, but the percentages have dropped. And really our high school graduation classes, we talk about the enrollment cliff, but they haven't been getting smaller. But likely what is happening is that if you looked at the demographics of the high school senior class, those demographics have changed substantially and have really, the groups that are growing within that demographic are groups that we haven't done as well with. So that's been a change, and I'm not going to steal any more of Elaine's thunder.
I was going to let you explain that slide. Thank you. The next slide, again, for academic year 2023, the college going rate by race and ethnic group noted there. You can see the different groups and the arrays, and there are clearly some groups who, even though they are smaller in population in our state, they are choosing to not attend. Similarly, this graph talks about our high school students who are attending schools where there are a preponderance of students or fewer students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. So starting on the left, low concentration students. So that high school, those high school students would be attending a school with fewer, bottom quartile of the number of students who qualify for free and reduced lunch. They have the highest college going rate. As you go down to those students and you get to the top quartile, so the highest concentration of low-income high school students, their college going rate is lower. And the blue bar there on the end generally reflects where we used to be for low concentrations high schools, and then the high concentration schools where we are now in the overall rates. So clearly family income is clearly impacting decision-making.
you think that relates to kids getting second jobs and not able to come? Yeah.
And again, just some information here, another slide with some detail by providing you some multiple years of information for race and ethnicity for the public college going rate. Again, these are the students who feed in that top line on that overall line graph. And then lastly, I did want to chat a little bit about some research that was just recently unveiled. There was a study conducted by Edge Research in partnership with HCM strategists and with support from the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation. It summarizes insights from September to October of last fall, 2023, with 10 focus groups conducted back in June of 2023 with 4,800 high school graduates. Also students, people 18 to 30 years of age who decided not to go to college, or people who dropped out of a 2-year or a 4-year college program. So they talked to several thousand people, and this is a follow-up to a study that was commissioned in 2022. So they're trying to find out what influenced their decision to either not attend or drop out. And this year's data was also expanded to include high school juniors and seniors. And the information there, there's a link noted there on the page to where you can find more information on this. And I'm just plagiarizing completely from their PowerPoint, but the biggest barriers that they were noted were concerns about cost and debt and the value. And they also, high school students seem to feel a pressure or uncertainty about getting it right. So going down an expensive path to go to school and then not really getting it right and picking the wrong program or just not getting it right. So some information there, the reasons they chose to not go or not to complete listed there, circled there at the top. Too expensive, didn't want to take on or any more or any debt, didn't enjoy going to high school. They didn't think it was worth the money to attend. It was too stressful, or they just were unsure about what they wanted to do. And you can see the percentages there for high school students, those high school juniors and seniors, and then those who non-enrolled. And they noted 4 in 10 high school schoolers did not enjoy school. So thinking about the timeline from when these students were polled, these high school students would have experienced high school during the pandemic. For some of us, is just not even fathomable. Hard to imagine what that would have been like. A nice table here in their research, the issues in a nutshell for high school students. There seems to be a norm and expectation to apply, and a lot of the information of recruiting and all of the attention is directed to high school students. And so once you move away and you've graduated and you're just a John Doe out in the workforce, you don't have as much attention laid upon you by institutions. And there's still a perceived value where they seem to understand that there is a value in their job earnings and their potential job security, but they can't quite seem to make that leap to that they can make the right decision in doing what they need to do to get a college credential. And then lastly, the very last slide, some information on how Kansas is doing compared to the country on our college attainment. So this is by race and ethnicity. The large blue line at the top are Asian Pacific Islanders, Kansans versus the US. So the US overall, you can see 73.8% comparing to 65% in Kansas. And you can see the different comparisons by race and ethnic groups. So we picked 25 to 34. These are the folks more likely to have just recently come out of college or university with a credential. And the Lumina Foundation graciously publishes information on attainment for each of the states on their website. So it's a great resource to have. That was not the last slide. So I forgot. I did include, just as a reminder, Dr. Ginther was here in September, I believe it was. She spoke to you about what is the labor market demand in Kansas looking like. And she explained to you that there are going to be 234,000 jobs in the next 10 years that will need to be filled, either to fill new jobs being created or fill the jobs of those who are going to exit for retirement or to go back to school. Of those jobs, 93% still predicted to need a bachelor's degree or higher, or some college or an associate's. So all that entirety of that pie is something post-secondary. None of that says just a high school diploma. Nowhere in that. So that was the last slide.
All right. Questions, comments? Questions for Elaine, comments? Sobering report. Work cut out for us. Questions or comments, anything? All right, before Elaine, you go into your next, we'll call for a break. It's 2:35. We'll pull back together 2:50. So we'll take a 15-minute break. All right, welcome back from social hour. Glad we like each other. I'll let everybody find their seats real quick. All right. All right, back to our
I didn't stand there the whole time, did you?
back to our regularly scheduled programming. Elaine Frisbee is doing a great job up here. It's a really important report. So please pay attention. It's our update on the Kansas Comprehensive Grant Program. Elaine, take it away.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Starting on page 30, we have a comprehensive review of the KCG program. This is one of the largest scholarships that our agency administers for the state. It was created by the legislature in 1998, so it's been around for quite a while. In 1998, 3 separate programs were merged into one. So at the time, we had the Board of Regents administered a program for the private nonprofit institutions, for Washburn, and separately for the state universities. So this merged those 3 together. From 1998 to 2021, state funding didn't really materially change very much, and we're going to get into some of that. There are 28 eligible institutions. Those include the institutions in the Kansas Independent College Association, as well as our 6 state universities and Washburn University. The statutes that govern the comp grant do specify the eligibility for the institutions. There is a pie chart on the bottom of page 30 that shows fall of 2022. There is one instance that I know of where the private independent institutions do provide us enrollment information. And so we merged that information for fall of 2022. We had 67,048 students at the public institutions who were Kansas resident first-time bachelor degree seeking students. And we had 14,852 students who were attending the private institutions. So the private institutions had 18% of the eligible population for this particular program. Public institutions, 82%. Now, eligible students, you must be a Kansas resident, you must be attending full-time at an eligible institution, and you must be pursuing your first bachelor's degree, and you have financial need. Your student can be eligible to receive the scholarship for up to 8 semesters. If you're in a certain program that's designated 5 years, you can get it for 10. You do fill out the federal form for free application for federal student aid. Used to be you had to do that by April 1. 2 years ago, this priority date was removed. At the top of page 31 is the list of the members of our advisory committee. We do have folks from the field who help advise the board in how the program should be administered. They are the ones who came to you 2 years ago and suggested removing that priority date. And you can see the names of the folks who serve currently, representing Washburn, K-State, Southwestern College, Wichita State, and the Independent College Association. This group last met on January 26th. Awards to students. How are awards determined? In the current year, and these max amounts were set 2 years ago. The maximum award for a student attending one of the private schools is $10,000. The maximum award for a student attending a public institution is $4,000. The statute that you see there, 32-122, outlines how the maximum award is calculated. And as we look at information for posted resident undergraduate tuition and fees, according to the statutory formula, those maximum awards would increase slightly next year. For the privates, $10,595, and for the publics, $4,526. How are the funds allocated out? So the Board of Regents receives an appropriation. For a number of years, that appropriation was 15.8, 16.3 million, did not fluctuate very much at all. Then the funds are allocated out by sector. We have the publics, we have the Washburn University piece, we have the State University piece, and then we have the privates piece. And even within those different sectors, we have layers of funding, and part of that is set in the statute. So we take the appropriation, we allocate it to each institution according to the formula or the sector. And then the schools, the financial aid staff at the institutions, award amounts to individual students. So Board of Regents staff are not making those awards. The institution's financial aid staff are making those awards. Allocations to the institutions, how those are calculated are shown on the bottom of page 31. That first layer of funding is known as the legal base, and that is $10.6 million. That amount is set in the statute, and you'll see in the tables, starting on page 32, those amounts have not changed according to the sector split. The enhancement funding, when the program did grow from the 10.6 million to roughly 16 million, there was what was called enhancement funding added. And so that was a new layer. This is not the new funding that started in 23, but before that. And this split, according to the advisory committee, they advised that the funding should be split a little more heavily to the public institutions. So you'll see in the tables there on page 32, a larger preponderance of the enhancement funding going to the public institutions than the privates. And the intent there, I think at the time, was that that would get a little bit more even. So generally, those two amounts combined have been roughly, let's say, $16 million. They haven't been split exactly 50%, 50%, but it's been fairly close. And then in 2023, the legislature and House Substitute for Senate Bill 267 made an additional $19 million appropriation for the comp grant. So the concept of the fund, the appropriation grew dramatically, and they added a new part to this where the institutions in the program had to provide a dollar for dollar match to their share of the $19 million. So this was described here on the top of page 32, where we talk about the new funding on a dollar for dollar basis. So again, legal base and the enhancement funding not changed. The $19 million in new funding was then the decision of the Board of Regents at the time. I think it was June of 2022. At the time, you received two recommendations from the advisory committee. One was to allocate the new $19 million according to where the most Pell eligible students were, so the money following the student who had financial need. The other proposal came from the private institutions that wanted to retain the roughly 50-50 public-private split. And at the time, the board decided it would be more impactful for students if we went with the first option, and that was the board vote at the time. So you can see there at the bottom of page 32, the table that reflects how those allocations were done for the legal base, the enhancement funding, and the state match funding, how those were divided out. And then we have a subtotal for the state funding. So this is the state general fund appropriation that totaled $35.3 million. And then the institutional match on the 19 million, how those each add up by sector. At the top of page 33, a little description of that discussion of the money following the student and how you adopt the board at the time adopted the proposal for that. And at the time, it was projected potentially that funding would increase the impact to nearly 11,000 students. So let me back up for a moment. In 2015, the comp grant served 10,059 students. In fiscal year 16, served just over 8,000. 2017, 9,000. In 2023, we hit over 22,000 students. So we have a chart there on page 34. The impact of the 2023 funding was more than double the number of students receiving comp grant or impacted by the comp grant program. The 2024 state appropriation there, just a reminder, a year ago, the board met in May and readjusted some of the sector allocations of that $19 million. It actually moved 279,000 from the public schools to the nonprofit private schools, according to where the Pell eligible preponderance of students was. So we made a little adjustment there. The graph again, so my main purpose here is to talk to you a little bit about the impact of that additional funding with the additional 19 million in match and 19 million in state funding and what we were able to do. You can see the awards there in the yellow line growing from 8,000 to over 22,000 students. So in 1 year, we more than doubled the size of the program. And we noted there in the green bar, the public schools actually exceeded the $19 million match, and we had $25 million worth of match. So I wanted to note that. But despite the additional state funds, the public universities were able to award comp grants to under 1/2 of their eligible applicants. The nonprofit private schools were able to award 3/4 of their eligible applicants. And you can see the percent awarded there in the table at the bottom of page 34. And you can see the average student award. So remember, I said the maximum at the privates is 10,000. The maximum at the public schools is 4,000. So you can see we're nowhere near, on average, those maximums, even with the additional funding. So the state universities awarded about 1/3 less on average than the privates. And Washburn University, they awarded almost half less than on average. The public universities had 82% of eligible applicants, and they awarded 76% of the grants. You can see a more detailed ratio on page 35. I just want to make a note. Cleveland University of Kansas City 2023 was the first year they participated in the program. They were newly designated in statute as a member, as one of the Kansas Independent College Association members. And so they became newly eligible for the program. So even though they were awarded or allocated an amount, they did not make any awards last year, but we do expect that they will in the future. So you can see Baker happens to be at the top. They awarded 66% of their eligible applicants, whereas McPherson awarded only 53.1% of their eligible applicants. And you can see toward the bottom then in the yellow bars, the public institutions, Emporia State, 1/3 of their eligible applicant students. And KU Med, 28%. Wichita State did get up to 58.6%. We could also glean from information that the institutions provided to us variations in the EFC. Now, EFC is changing next year to SAI in the FAFSA language, but EFC is expected family contribution. So the graph on page 36 outlines to you on average what is the EFC for comp grant recipients at each of the institutions. And you can see there is some great variety there. I would note for you the yellow bars at the bottom, they're clustered together, $1,400, $1,300, $1,500, $1,800. That is the expected family contribution for comp grant state recipients. So very low estimated family contributions. Lastly, on page 37, this table, the graph, important for the purpose of those calculations for what the maximum awards could be next year. Those slightly higher amounts I noted for you. So these are the published tuition and fee rates for all of the participating institutions. Again, you can see some great variety there, where the nonprofits average out at $30,240, the publics average out at just over $9,000. For the coming year, fiscal year 2025, the 2024 legislature has been working to craft its budget for 2025. They have both added in the House budget and the Senate budget funding for the comp grant. In the House, at the time this was prepared, this was House appropriations. This has become the House position. They voted on that this morning. there's a table on the top of page 38. The funding on the House budget increases the program to $45.9 million. $45 million exactly. So they add almost $9 million to the program, over $9 million. But with that additional funding, then comes language in the budget bill that would require the split among the allocations to be the same as it was prior to the change in the program with the 19 million. So it takes it back to the 2022 split. And so the calculations you see there where the state funds and the institutional match for the state universities are just under 46% and the nonprofits just hovering under 51%. So with the House additional funding and the requirement on how the allocations are split would actually reduce the funding for Washburn slightly by $275,000, increase the state university's funding slightly, $112,000, and increase the private school support by $9.9 million. The Senate position is different. They have added $5 million to the program, so it becomes a over $40 million program. Their proviso, their language would require simply that the private schools get 50% exactly. So a slightly different language. This, because the funding is not as great and because of the 50-50 split, public-private, the state universities would lose 1.9 million and Washburn University would lose 156,000 and the nonprofit private institutions would gain 7.1 million. So the House and the Senate Budget Conference Committee will have to work out what they decide to do between these positions. And that's how the program will look next year. The other aspect I want to also clarify, in year one, 2023, the institutional match was only on the 19 million, but fiscal year 2024 and on, it's on the entirety of the amount. So whether it's 45 million or 40.3 million, the match for the institutions would have to be that higher amount.
Regent Lane.
Thank you very much. Are there any prohibitions that the match could be a tuition buy down or discounting?
When the board took its vote on the option for attributing the additional funding to the public schools for where the Pell students are, at the time there was a declaration that the tuition, just a waiver, if you will, or tuition discounting should not meet the match threshold. It actually has to be $1.
Other questions or comments? Yes, Regent Winter. If you can turn on your mic too. Yep.
That assumes people care about what I say. I may want to not have my comments noted. This morning, we went through in fiscal affairs, very detailed financial reports on 3 of our regional universities. We discussed the fact that about audits and the annual financial reports of our universities are subject to audits and so on and so forth. What similar restrictions or requirements are made with respect to these private universities? Do they have to submit their budgets to us? Do we have any review process? What safeguards do we have about proper husbandry of their funding?
Well, I would make a distinction, Regent Winter, between the Kansas Independent College Association and the other private institutions of Kansas where our agency regulates them. So setting that latter group aside, regulated by our private post-secondary group, the independent colleges are, I guess I would say they're grandfathered in state law where they are completely independent of from public oversight. And so our relationship with them for administering these financial aid programs is we set them the guidelines. This is how you administer the funds, and then we provide those funds to them. So no, they do not provide us their financials.
And with respect to those 2 categories, you just mentioned, how many state colleges are in each of those two categories, the privates?
The Independent College Association, I believe there's 20 institutions. The private post-secondary, the number I think has fluctuated, and I don't know what that number is. Crystal Peterbaugh would know that, Director Peterbaugh.
But neither group is required to submit their annual financial reports to us.
The latter is.
Such that
So
we can, are they audited?
for those institutions that we regulate, yes, they are required to provide us information on their financial status. Absolutely.
And how many are there of those?
I will have to find out.
What other review requirements or authority, responsibility do we have over either of these two private university groups?
Those institutions regulated by the Board of Regents, we do have a lot of, and we allow them to we certificate them to we certify them as you are in good standing and you are allowed to operate in Kansas. The Independent College Association, they are independent and they privately funded except for these financial aid programs, and they are not.
So they're completely free of review or regulation from us other than this scholarship program?
I believe so, but they are accredited, of course.
I understand.
Mhm.
And why is it I think he's told us that there were, the average student award for nonprofits is 4,000. For Washburn, it's about half, 2,100.
Mhm.
For state universities, it's 27. Why is it so much higher for the nonprofits, the average award?
They are serving fewer students to a greater extent. We just have that many more eligible folks. And I think our financial aid teams are trying to help more with fewer dollars.
So with respect to the Pell program, as I understand it, generally speaking, there's quite a bit of visibility into the family finances and so on in order to be a Pell recipient. Is that correct?
I'm not sure I understand the question. Sorry.
I'll make it as a positive statement. There are a number of requirements in order to be Pell eligible.
Yes.
One has to disclose a lot of information about the student, about the student's family, about the financial standing of the student's family, et cetera. Is that correct?
Yes, there's a simplified FAFSA going forward. In the past, it has been a much lengthier documentation.
So let's call that the Pell requirements. Are there any Pell requirements for the private colleges so they can utilize this money?
For any student to be a participant in this program, they would be filling out a FAFSA. So that's a federal form that everyone would fill out in a standardized way.
Is that the same thing as Pell, FAFSA?
Filling out the federal form is what then helps you identify that you are eligible for Pell.
Okay,
Yeah.
so all the students who would receive funding if it passes the new program,
Mhm.
they all will have to go through the Pell process, be
FAFSA.
Pell eligible.
Mhm. Yes.
Thank you.
Regent Lane?
Just a follow-up to that line of insight. So all families, regardless of the institution that they are choosing for their student to attend, have to complete the FAFSA to be eligible. That does not necessarily mean that they will meet the criteria for Pell, right?
Correct.
FAFSA has to be completed, but they may not be designated as a low socioeconomic family.
Yes.
As in Pell. Thank you.
Which is,
Thank you for helping me. That was what I was trying to get at. Excuse me.
Thank
so,
you for that. Yes.
so when we look at the chart on page 36 about the estimated family contribution.
Mhm.
And so, help me understand if we've targeted this towards Pell eligible families, how a Pell eligible family could be able to make a $13,000, $849 tuition payment. Am I?
So you do not have to be Pell eligible to receive a comp grant, but you
Got it.
can, and they can be then, that's how the financial aid staff then merge that information for each student, tailor an award to that student.
Yeah, and
So-
so I think our 6 universities are largely trying to use this money towards additional to Pell eligible students. And I think that's what's reflected here.
Yes.
What it looks like the privates are doing is getting their allocation based on the number of Pell eligible students they have, but they're just using as regular scholarship dollars as a part of this. Is that a reasonable conclusion?
For students who do have financial need, according to the methodology, but that does not mean you are Pell eligible.
But there's not, I mean, I guess they each decide on what determines financial need. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah, there's not a standard. Were you gonna say something, President Muma? Okay.
Chair Rolfe, I have a comment.
Yes, President Flanders?
So I think it'd be worthy for the advisory group or a group to perhaps examine this closer. And I don't think everyone should need to be Pell. There is a donut hole right above Pell where you don't quite qualify for Pell, but you don't have very much resource. So what is that? And then setting a standard to say, we're going to target families in this area. The program is designed for students and families who have financial need. And I think it'd be good work to say what does financial need mean.
Well, and I've been around for a lot of these conversations the last 5 years. There was a practice before. We started a need-based aid ask in the budget, right? And so part of this probably reflects part of that practice before, and that's where we've tried to hold harmless everybody that was involved in that so that they could keep going forward. But generally, when we think about our priorities and what we're trying to do, and as we're seeing the changing landscape, the ask on this has always been about focusing on the need-based aid group. And that's why we tied it to Pell eligible and all that. And so I just think that's important because I think that story gets lost in this versus just trying to throw more scholarship dollars out there into the universe. We are specifically trying to focus on lower income and the need-based aid. And that is the spirit of the ask and the strategy of this board. So I just to make that statement and try and make it clear. Yes, Chancellor Gerard.
Yeah, Blake, in response to your comment about the donut hole, the reality is we're only funding 50% of the applicants right now. And at a much lesser amount than our counterparts. So you could expand the pool, but that 50% will drop to 40% of the ones that we can actually fund, unless we get a lot more money.
Yep. Yes, President Flanders.
Yeah, so what your point would be is until we get this percentage up, you might just want to say you have to be Pell eligible. Right, okay.
And just to add on, the Pell, when you look at that chart on page 36, there's a note there at the bottom of page 35. So in 2022, 2023, federal Pell eligibility was you have an EFC of 6,200 or less. 6,200 or less. And we're serving at the public schools, fourth of that. So.
I'm sorry, I was listening, but what is the 6,200 average household
6,200,
income?
so when you fill out a FAFSA and you
Yeah.
fill out that federal form, if you have an EFC that's $6,200 or less, you are Pell eligible.
Other questions or comments on this important subject?
John,
Yes.
Chair, so excuse me. I want to go back to page 36. And I'm curious for a little more explanation about what the heading means. Average expected family contribution for KCG state awards. Explain that to me. What's contribution mean and why? I'm particularly interested in why the privates have such a larger expected contribution than the publics.
So on average, from the information sent in from the KCG schools to our financial aid team, the average expected family contribution. So when you fill out that federal form for financial aid, it computes this EFC or expected family contribution, what you as a student with your family, your parents, what they are expected to contribute for your cost of attendance.
And does
So-
that mean and can afford?
And can afford. So as you read those numbers across, there's not a general, there's not a direct connection to a family income number, but as those numbers get larger, your family income is higher. So the family income of those served at the public institutions is much less than what most of our colleagues at the private schools are able to afford from the family side.
So I would deduce from that that these families from the privates are more affluent than the families from the publics.
Yes,
When
on
one
average. Now
receiving the
keep in
money.
mind, this is all on average, yes.
I understand.
Yes.
But on average, for students, for families where students receive scholarships, they're a lot higher wealth families than the publics.
Yes.
So we're
And
subsidizing the wealthy.
well, so the cost of attendance to go to the private institutions is higher, and that is what's going to generate some of your need, your financial need in that computation.
Thank you, I understand.
And they also get a higher grant from the comprehensive grant. In addition to this differential, they're getting about twice.
Mm.
Is it 4,000 or 2,000?
They are on average receiving $4,000 a year.
So they're getting more money from the comp grant as an individual student. That's
So they start out, that cohort of folks starts out as, well, as more affluent and are receiving more money from the state.
correct.
That's the way that works. Kind of reverse perversion. Try not to editorialize anymore.
Right. Regents, did you have something to add? No. Okay. Other questions or comments here? Hey, public universities, thank you guys for following what we're asking here and who you're targeting with these dollars and the families that you're helping. So we appreciate that. And so that's evident here. Any other questions? Important we understand this comp grant. There's been lots of different thoughts and information that's been shared out there that can be confusing. So I just want to make sure you guys are all clear on this. Elaine, that was a great presentation. Thank you for organizing it in the ways you did. Anybody? Last call? Okay, we'll move on. Thank you very much, Elaine Frisbee. All right, we'll move now into academic affairs. And on his first week on the job, we're going to welcome up Rusty Monholland. Did I say it right? Monholland.
Yes, sir.
All right.
Thank you very much. If I may take a moment of personal privilege, want to thank everybody for welcoming me back to Kansas so warmly. Thanks to Dr. Blake Flanders for taking a chance on someone like me and bringing me in. I'm very, very grateful. We've got a great academic affairs team, and they've already helped me out a great deal. Sonia and I, as native Kansans, are certainly looking forward to getting back here, and I'm looking forward to working with all of you to, this gives me an opportunity to give back to the state, that the higher ed system that's done so much for me and my family. This was discussed in Basque this morning. It is to modify a minor revision to the performance agreement guidelines and procedures. Per board policy, the board has adopted guidelines and procedures for the development of performance agreements with each post-secondary educational institution. Those guidelines and procedures are detailed in the document starting on page 55 of the agenda. When the performance funding model changes, as it did with the adoption of the new, actually, I think I'm started with the wrong one. I'm sorry. This is an act to change the academic year 2024 performance report. So the issue paper for this item starts on page 39 of the agenda. Based on the feedback from institutions at the February 14th Basque meeting, Regent Lane put a working group together to make recommendations to the committee on the performance reporting expectations. The working group met February 29th and recommended removing the requirement that the academic degree maps adhere to the specifications in the degree map guidance document, attachment A, and the general education coding for academic degree maps document or attachment B, but only for academic year 2024 performance report, which is due July 1 of this year. The requirement that the degree maps adhere to those specification documents would be restored for the reports due in July of 2025 and 2026.
All right, questions or comments? Regent Lane.
Thank you very much, Dr. Monholland. You captured that well. Just to re-emphasize that this was providing some flexibility because of the scope of the many projects that we're asking our institutions to do. So the change is for 1 year only. In the meantime, the degree maps, we must have a link to directly to the degree maps at the institution. A year from now, they'll all be in this standardized format.
Thank you, Regent Lane. Any other questions or comments? All right, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve.
I'll move.
Moved and seconded. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. All opposed, same sign. Hey, unanimous on your first one. Good job, Rusty.
It may get harder after the
I
third
had
day.
to back
so
up and
far.
start over. And so forgive me for repeating myself, but the second item is act on requesting action on performance agreement guidelines and procedures. As I said earlier, per board policy, the board has adopted guidelines and procedures for the development of performance agreements with each post-secondary educational institution. Those guidelines and procedures are detailed beginning on page 55 of the agenda. When the performance funding model changes, as it did with the adoption of the new projects-based model, the document must be updated to reflect those changes. This document gives a brief background to the performance agreements and ties them to the strategic plan, reminding us that the projects-based performance funding model is based on institutions utilizing proven practices that will position the system to move the needle on building a future. It specifies the 5 projects involved with the performance agreements. Math pathways, co-requisite math support, developmental education, co-requisite English support, developmental education, system-wide course placement measures for math and English, and academic degree maps. And each project shall be worth 20% of the funding, and that the full completion of each of the given projects will result in 100% of any new funding awarded. And finally, the document includes the definition of new state funds and the performance agreement statute as it has in the past.
All right, we'll see if you can go 2 for 2. Do we have any questions or comments? Do I hear a motion to approve?
The comment before?
Please, Regent Lane.
Members, just to remind you, if you go to page 57 of the document, it outlines there the projects that are in place. And this is a major change for how we're going to do the performance funding. You'll see the degree maps is the last one on the list, and that's that little adjustment that we have just approved. So great work by the team, great work, Rusty, and I'm glad to make a motion for approval.
All right, that's been moved for approval. Do I have a second? Second, do I hear any further discussion? Good work on this, guys. All right. All in favor, please say aye.
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 All opposed, same sign. 2 for 2. Welcome to the team.
Thank you very much.
All right, Monholland. Next up, we have Misty Canucks. Did I say that right? Did I get that one? Come on, Misty. We're going to act on the proposed Kansas reapplication days, October 7th through the 9th, 2024.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Last year, you approved the Kansas free application days. It was November 7th through the 9th, 2023. That was to boost the number of college applicants in the state and increase the FAFSA completion rates. as well as increase access to higher education, especially for our underserved populations. Some preliminary data is provided in your board materials today. I anticipate some additional data will be provided after the 20th Census Day. I would like to highlight KBOR in collaboration with CASFA did provide an opportunity for families as well as students to receive financial aid assistance during a virtual opportunity that was held the first week in March from 6 to 8 p.m. So our institutions across the state volunteered to provide that assistance to those students and families. Based on that positive feedback that we've received, we do plan to continue that effort in the future. Today, I'm excited to provide you with a proposal to schedule the Kansas free application days in October. October is consistent with the Apply Kansas initiative campaign in our state. The October 7th through the 9th, 2024 dates would allow Kansas residents, regardless of age or income, to submit a general undergraduate application for admission at our Kansas public universities. The technical colleges as well as private colleges have been invited to participate and join that initiative as well. Just as a note, the community colleges in our state, they're free to apply to year-round. The dates were vetted through various groups throughout the state that includes secondary as well as post-secondary members within those groups. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Regent Benson.
I have a question, Mr. Chair. Thank you. Misty, I realize we won't get the matriculation data until this fall for last year's event. Do we have a goal matriculation rate that we'd like to see, whether that's official or unofficial, just a ballpark?
I'll have to get back to you on that. I think our overall goal would be to increase the college going rate, just as, you know, it's all of our goal. But I certainly will get back to you on that.
Yes, Chancellor.
We'll just make a couple comments from our experience in this go-around. What we experienced was 1,400 applications in that 3-day period, 275. Ultimately, we evaluated and ultimately went through. Out of that, 100 have paid an enrollment deposit. That's an 8% yield, which is half of our normal yield. And we don't have the FAFSA data yet, unfortunately, so we can't really speak to did we hit the right group. The problem with doing it, our experience has been our challenged students apply later. And so the earlier that you do this, the less likely that's who you're going to grab. And at least our team felt like it would be better, you would hit the target that you want if we did it later rather than earlier. Now, I know the high schools, I mean, I think a lot of what we saw was the counselors just said apply to every one of our schools. So we all got a bunch more applications. We did a ton more work, but they still went wherever they decided they were going to go. So I just question whether we actually are achieving what we're trying to do. I don't think we have all the data yet to answer that question. But at least the early data that we have would argue that I'm not sure we are accomplishing what we're trying to do. Just our experience.
Thank you, Chancellor. Other questions or comments? Okay, so it's proposed that we do this again October 7th through the 9th, 2024. Do I hear a motion to approve? Moved.
I'll second.
Seconded. Do I hear any discussion on it? Yeah. Is your microphone on the line?
Chair Rolfe, I want to go back on the comment that is made. Is there a way we can analyze what days is better to have these free application days? I can see the case in this matter.
I think, you know, my thought after hearing the chancellors, there's having 2 years where the data sets are actually different. When we do it, actually can probably tell us something. So I'm still comfortable rolling with it here with these October dates, knowing that, okay, well, because it was later this year, right? Yeah, it's November. So we'll have a comparison And that then can tell us at least directionally, maybe what direction we want to go in the future. But that'd be my own personal thought on that. Feel free to suggest anything else you want to do. Anybody?
Mr. Chair, I would also encourage us to think about this really more as a marketing effort than a true student grab or enrollment spike. Because, marketing's tough to quantify. If you just look at the pure numbers, marketing often, you don't get it doesn't ROI very easily. But if we do it right from a marketing standpoint, maybe we get other students that maybe weren't thinking about enrolling, that it kind of plants a seed and maybe it leads to future enrollment. So I would encourage us to look at it through that lens.
Regent Lane.
Dr. Ship, what have you experienced now that you don't have application fees at all? Thinking about Chancellor's comment about students tend to apply at different windows, and we really don't want them to just apply everywhere because of the free window in those 3 days. So what's been the experience at Pitt State?
Well, a couple things, right? There was an initial move, this was several years ago now before I arrived, to do that, where we saw a bump in applications, and that's continued pretty straightforward for us. This year, a little too tough to tell. I think we want to wait till we get through this bottleneck with FAFSA, right? Because that's a bit of a challenge. We saw the similar increase in applications that the chancellor talked about, what that yield rate actually looks like, right? We can see that students are still waiting to make their decision. So it's kind of backlogged this into midsummer, quite honestly, for us. But I think it was a good, I guess I would always advocate for removing barriers, right? Removing points of friction. This is one of those. And we've just looked at some data today that's pretty compelling around, students that can go to college or choosing not to. It's one thing, it's not the only thing, but it becomes one of those factors that yet is another barrier. So I'm always going to be I'm glad Pitt State had done this years ago, and they did see an increase in applications. I think our yield rate has not been great, and you're always going to be challenged to then reel in those students if you can. So that's value proposition, right fit. That's work that we're doing on campus now. So I think it's initially good, but there's just a lot of work between getting those students that apply to getting them on your campus, right? It's probably more work for students that are more challenged, right? So we have to rethink how we manage our business practices to make it even easier for those students. Just my 2 cents.
Chair Rawl, if
Yes.
I may.
Please.
I really appreciate your comments, Chancellor, and also President Ship, and also yours, Regent Benson. I do think it's important that when we look at these, we don't want to cost ourselves a bunch of money, time, and effort that could have been put into recruiting students that we knew would come. And so I think that is really important. I still think it's a good project, but something that we really probably need to analyze once the data comes back, because we don't, like I said, we don't want to be causing you more issues than we're solving in terms of the number of students that we bring in. And I'm curious if you noticed this, and I think our community college presidents could speak to this, that do not have any kind of application fee. And that is that we used to get a whole lot of bogus applications because there was no fee. And my understanding was that because we were getting those was students, maybe international students that were not students, but were wanting an email address. Did you experience any of that? I was curious about, or do we even know if that was the case? We tended to get a lot of that, and that was these, bogus, they really weren't wanting to be students. They were just wanting to access our system, basically. I was just curious, but I appreciate all the comments. I still think it's a good thing going forward, but something we probably really need to take a look at.
All right, so the motion on the table right now, I think I got a motion, didn't I? And a second? Okay, yeah, so this is discussion, just trying to remember where I was with Robert rules here. Is that we do Kansas free application days, October 7th through the 9th this year. That's on the table. Is there any other discussion? Okay, hearing none. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All opposed, same sign. Okay. Off doing it again. We'll monitor it and take a look. All right, on to governance. Like to welcome my brother from another mother. Gage Rolfe is the right way to say this one, so.
Thank you, Chair Rolfe. I have a package deal for you here today. Board staff has been shepherding two sets of administrative regulations through the rulemaking process. Both sets were distributed to you with your board materials, and they're summarized in the issue paper in the agenda materials as well. The first set involved the Kansas Adult Learner Grant Act, with which the legislature enacted last session. It would provide grants of up to $3,000 per semester for students 25 and older pursuing bachelor's degrees. The legislature, when it enacted that program, directed the board to adopt regulations addressing 5 topics: application renewal forms and deadlines, appeal procedures, grant conditions and requirements, procedures to request absence from school while receiving the grant. And the other area would be rules on postponing grant requirements. To check all of these boxes, board staff have drafted 6 regulations. The other set of regulations are 23 obsolete regulations that we seek to revoke. They generally fall into 3 buckets. The first bucket would be regulations whose underlying program have been discontinued. The second bucket would be regulations where changes in particularly federal law have superseded the regulation. And the third bucket would be regulations that have just aged out. These regulations that are 40 years old and haven't been updated in that time. For both sets, the governance committee reviewed these and approved moving forward in November of 2023. As required by state law, both sets of regulations have been approved by the Department of Administration and the Kansas Attorney General. They've been held open for public comment for the last 60 days. We've held 2 public hearing on each set. We've received no comments from the public, and we reviewed these regulations in January with the Joint Committee on Administrative Rules and Regulations, and that committee had no feedback. As a result, both sets of regulations are ripe for board action if you choose to adopt them. And if you do so choose, they must be adopted by roll call vote.
All right, well, that's great. We like getting rid of obsolete things, and public's had time to comment. Do we have any comments before we do a roll call vote? Okay, do I hear a motion to, I guess I need a motion second, then we'll do roll call. So do I have a motion to approve? So moved by Regent Dykes. Do I have a second? Regent Benson. Okay, let's do the roll call. Is that John Yeary calling roll, or is that Misty Knox? Misty Knox.
Regent Rolfe,
Aye.
Regent Ice,
Aye.
Regent Benson,
Aye.
Regent Dykes,
Aye.
Regent Johnston,
Aye.
Regent Lane,
Aye.
Regent Mendoza, absent, Regent Parasker,
Aye.
Regent Winter.
Aye.
Nice job. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
I think what we have in common is the H is silent in both of our last names. All right.
So I recognize I'm totally out of order here, Mr. Chair.
Yes, please.
But
Regent Ice.
I was slow on the last topic because I was looking for the data. I didn't want to speak. Back to the point of, I think we don't know what the data is telling us yet about the free days. Emporia State, Pittsburgh State are both already free, right? It's always. And they actually have a higher percentage of applications in the window last year than KU, K-State, or Wichita State. So when we look at that percentage and say, oh, wow, the percentage is really high, it really worked. I think we call that into question. So I think there's lots more to learn here. Did everybody say make sense?
It sure did. And I never mind you being out of order. Just jump right in. Chancellor, go ahead.
Most ridiculous comment of the
On the theme of being out of order, actually, it's about the last motion that just passed. Since it's
Okay.
not really about passing or not, it's a management question of who's responsible for identifying whether somebody has stayed in the state for 2 years and worked or has to pay money back, which is part of the law. Whose job is that to do that?
Kabor. Okay, we'll give John Dykus that job. No, I'm
Sounds
sorry.
hard. Sounds hard to me.
Yeah, is that, that's something we do already on Promise Act and stuff. Yeah, and we get the data and do the best we can. Yeah. Yep, fair question. Anybody else want to be out of order before we go to the next? Yes, Regent Lane.
Mr. Chair, I thought we used John Rolfe's rules of orders, not Robert's, so I'm confused. Would you clarify?
Yeah, you know, it goes back and forth sometimes. Never know what you're gonna get. It's like a box of chocolates. Okay. Yeah, here we go. Okay, I know. All right, so saving the best for last, Fred Patton, the one and only, with a legislative update. It's been busy.
It has. Good afternoon, everybody. This morning, I told the system of council presidents that we were in week 10 of the legislative session. It's actually week 11. Some days do feel like weeks around here, but I was wrong this morning. Time does fly. Friday is our last day for bills and non-exempt committees. So committee work should finish by Friday. Most of them will probably wrap up on Thursday because they don't tend to work a whole lot on Friday, but we'll see. They've got that deadline, so they may be here. And then next week is the final week for bills in either house. So they'll have to pass out of either house before first adjournment. Actually, that's in 2 weeks. So the end is near. Next week, you'll see them on the floor. They'll be debating a number of bills. Then they'll do some conference committees, and then they'll leave town for most of April, and they'll come back at the end and finish things up. As you've heard, both the House and Senate have passed their budget bills. Lots of discussion has been on the comp grant, whether it's the comp grant specifically, or they try to tie in other funding to the comp grant. So that's something that keeps coming up. We'll keep having those discussions and try to educate the members on why what you've done so far has been important, and try to educate them on the numbers. I don't think they're quite grasping how many students are benefiting or how many students are not benefiting, and how we can make more of a difference by doing what you've done so far. So budgets are done. There's things we like in some budgets. There's things we don't like in others. And so now that it's at the conference committee, you'll have the 3 members in the Senate and 3 members of the House come together in conference committee to negotiate that. We'll do our best to keep the good things and try to get rid of the things we don't like so much. And then we'll see what happens. A lot of the work, what a budget looks like, comes out of this conference committee report. So we'll know shortly what the budget's going to look like. You've got your legislative priorities. We're still working on those. Other than one of your priorities, which was the Kansas Strategic Research Fund, I think there are paths available for all of them to still become law. Some of them will have to jump through some hoops and try to get them incorporated in conference committees, but there are paths, so we'll keep working on those. In addition to your priorities, we're still monitoring a number of bills that either directly or indirectly impact higher ed. We've been fairly successful at either improving or halting some things that maybe you wouldn't have been in favor of. So that's been a positive, and we'll keep our eyes open for other things that may spring up in the next couple of days. I'd also like to praise Regent Lane. It's been great having you in the building a lot the last couple of days, and including the chancellor and the presidents. I think it makes a difference when you guys are in there in some of those meetings, and I think leadership has noticed that. So thank you for being over there. Any questions about what's going on? If in my updates I send out, if you ever have any questions, reply back and let me know. Happy to get you more information.
Regent Winter.
What can you tell us about what's going on with the comp grant? Where did the big new funding come from? Where did the idea of allocation, who's behind?
Yeah, so I mean, there's a couple members, both in the House and the Senate, who have a large number, 2 or 3 independent colleges in their district. And so most of what we're seeing is coming from them. They're the ones making the motions. So they have constituents back home that they're advocating for. That's where we're seeing it come from.
Other questions for Fred? Hey, Fred, you've been excellent.
Thank you.
Appreciate all your hard work. And I know there's still a little more ahead, but thanks for living out the grind.
Absolutely. Thank you all.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. Any old or new business to come before this board today? All right. I'll get working on my book, John Rolfe's Rules of Order. It'll be a short one. All right. With that, we'll stand adjourned.